answering any interview question, 3 vital steps to success. Job interviews are a stressful experience, but if you follow 3 vital steps, you'll be more confident and more successful. First, before the interview, anticipate the questions you're likely to get. Second, plan your answers using the STAR method, which we'll discuss in a moment. Third, during the interview, recognize what kind of question the interviewer is asking before you try to answer. Let's take a closer look at these 3 steps. By studying the job description, you can get a good idea of the questions you're likely to be asked in an interview. Start by identifying the skills and attributes the employer is looking for. Both hard skills, such as technical qualifications, and soft skills, such as leadership, listening, and teamwork. Interviewers will typically frame questions around these requirements, so you need to be ready. Now, match those employer needs with your capabilities, education, and experience. For example, if the employer wants someone with leadership skills, identify ways that you have exhibited leadership at work, in college, or in volunteer activities. Think creatively here. Even if your experience or skills don't match exactly, think of ways that you demonstrate the general capability. After you have an idea of the questions you're likely to encounter, plan your answers using the STAR method, which works nicely for most interview questions. S and T stand for situation or a task you faced in the past. This could be something on the job, in school, or in some other context. A stands for the approach you took in response, and R stands for the results. Let's say you identified dealing with conflict as one of the requirements from the job description, and you've matched that with something in your work or school experience, such as, I had to complete a lab project when one of my partners refused to do any work. This would be the situation you faced. Next, think back to the approach you took and the results of your effort to resolve the conflict. Now shape this into a 20 or 30-second story that you can have ready whenever an interviewer asks. Tell me about a time you had to deal with conflict. When you're in the interview, be sure to listen carefully to the entire question. Then, before you answer, take a second to recognize what kind of question the interviewer is asking. Although companies use a wide variety of interview questions, most fall into 4 categories. Let's take a look at each type. This first category of old standby questions includes some common and fairly generic questions that show up often in interviews. You can find a list of common interview questions in your textbook or on various websites. These include questions such as, what is the hardest decision you've ever had to make? What is your greatest weakness? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? What didn't you like about previous jobs you've held? Tell me about yourself. Study this category of questions and work out brief answers that present you and your qualifications in a positive light. At the very least, be prepared to answer the 5 questions shown here. Your Bovee and Thill textbook, career websites, and your college's Career Center have advice on preparing solid answers. Next is a category of questions that relate specifically to you and your qualifications and experience. These behavioral questions explore how you handled various situations in the past. They often deal with teamwork, communication, leadership, conflict resolution, problem solving, and other soft skill areas. The interviewer will be asking about an attribute or skill that is relevant to the position and wants to know how you have demonstrated this quality in the past. Here are a few examples of behavioral questions. Tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult teammate. Explain how you resolved a communication breakdown with a boss or professor. Tell me about a mistake you made on the job and what you learned from it. Tell me about an important goal you set for yourself and how you achieved it. The STAR method is perfect for answering these questions. And even if you haven't anticipated a specific question, you can use STAR to improvise an answer on the spot. The next group, situational questions, are similar to behavioral questions, but they deal with hypothetical situations in the future rather than actual situations from your past. The STAR method is also a great way to answer these questions, but they are a little more challenging than behavioral questions because you have to imagine yourself on the job in whatever situation the interviewer has described, and then figure out the approach you would take. After describing that approach, you can then speculate on the likely results. If you've prepared well by studying the job description and researching the company, you'll have a better chance of identifying an approach that will impress the interviewer. For example, if you know this company puts a high priority on customer satisfaction and the situational question is a customer service scenario, you should describe an approach that would lead to a satisfied customer. The final category are those questions that we might label as impossible to answer. An interviewer may ask you something bizarre such as, "How many light bulbs are there in the United States?" Or, "How would you lift a car to the top of this building?" The point of these questions isn't to see if you can get the answer right, but how you approach the problem. The interviewer wants to know if you can think on your feet and construct a logical way to move toward an answer. Start by identifying any information you have and work forward from there, letting the interviewer hear your thought process. It's fine to think out loud when answering these questions. With the light bulb question, for example, you could start with a guess of how many people there are in the U.S. and divide that by a guess of the average number of people per household to arrive at the number of households, and then estimate how many light bulbs are in the average house or apartment. And then do the same thing for schools, office buildings, and so on. Again, the point isn't to get the right answer, but to show that you can think in a logical fashion. So when you're getting ready for job interviews, remember these 3 steps. Before the interview, anticipate the questions you are likely to get by researching the position and reviewing your qualifications. Plan your answers by using the STAR method wherever it applies. And during the interview, recognize the types of questions you are being asked before you try to answer them. With this approach, you'll reduce the stress of interviewing and be ready with clear, concise, and impressive answers. The 3 titles in the Bovee Thill series offer in-depth coverage of the full spectrum of employment-related communication, from planning a career to developing a resume to preparing for interviews. To order examination copies of these texts, visit Bovee and Thill's Business Communication blog. Click the button on the upper right-hand side of the homepage that's labeled Order Examination Copies. On the ordering page, you'll find a link to a helpful chart that compares Bovee and Thill's 3 texts, so you can choose the book that will best serve the needs of you and your students. You'll also find a link to Quick Switch, a brand new system that will enable you to switch from your current text to a Bovee and Thill text quickly and easily. The system provides transition guides, a syllabus assistant, and a lesson plan assistant. Please visit the ordering page now.